Amber Littlejohn, the places where there no law, where they're mixed legality, where they may have some medical legality, but they still are criminalizing people for possession. It makes no sense, but let's go through these states. I just pulled up a list. So there's Indiana, Iowa, Idaho, Pennsylvania, which is a little shocking because it's next to Jersey, Utah, which I understand, West Virginia, Wyoming, and Wisconsin, which is another very complicated state where you still can get arrested and sent to jail for marijuana for cannabis possession. Make that make sense. And what do we need to do, those of us who live in these states, to at least decriminalize the use of marijuana or the possession of it?
Well, again, you're fighting a really difficult battle that is entrenched in a history of racism, a habit of incarcerating people. Cannabis and suspicion of cannabis possession is quite often used as a vehicle to continue police engagement with people. So it is a challenge in those states where they are deeply red states that are not the most diverse states, where racism is flourishing. To get to that point is really challenging. Even somewhere like Georgia that has a medical program still continues to aggressively arrest people for cannabis possession. So getting to the legalization point is really the hardest part of this, because it takes away the ability to continue to arrest people. It, there is within that a recognition that, hey, this isn't going to lead people to just play jazz and steal your daughter all day. But this is something that really is not the detriment and the harm to society that we once thought it was. And for some reason, despite ample proof to the contrary, that is something we are having a really hard time getting folks to acknowledge in this space. And this is while ignoring the harms of things that are commonly accepted, like alcohol and cigarettes and prescription drugs and a plethora of other things that have caused far more damage than cannabis. We continue to still see that. And that, again, is because it is so tied into, unjust enforcement of criminal laws and into racism.
I did fail to mention Georgia and Florida. And you think about Georgia and you think Atlanta, you think, like a version of Chocolate City. Like how is it possible that you could still get arrested in Georgia for marijuana possession? But yes, you can.
But Karen, you can't, because the criminal system makes more money when they arrest someone for something. So if you think about what prison actually looks like, that's a $40 billion industry for the state. And if you think about all the salaries that are connected to that pipeline to prison, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a judge, the different all in between the facilities, the police officers that are being paid. This is how they're keeping their jobs and their livelihood. So right now they're booming in their industry because they can get probable cause by motor vehicle, pulling over period and smelling it and saying, I'm gonna search your vehicle for, cannabis. And it's completely targeted. They don't want to lock up their own, so they lock us up at a percentage that is, in New Orleans itself was 86.6% times more likely. Now, does that make sense when we know people use cannabis at equal, all races uses it at equal amounts, but yet we're targeted? And we have been targeted because you can't enslave us anymore. So what are you going to do? Make money off of us in a different way?
I mean, we were talking about this in relationship to Brittany Griner. Yes, okay, she's languishing in Russia and it's horrible. However, and there are millions probably of people, some with life sentences for marijuana in America, and we don't have the same level of passion or outrage. And they're enslaved. We were just talking about Angola in Louisiana, one of the most, where they still would have people on horseback with guns picking cotton in Louisiana, one of the worst prisons in the country. And they have people making things, furniture and all kinds of, it is slave labor. and we're not outraged about it the way we should be.
Last year, we were able to get 10,000 pardons for misdemeanor charges. But the problem with that, Karen, is that even though they were pardoned, if they don't get those expunged from their records, then now they can't get job clearance. So again, if you're going to be a teacher, but you have a possession of marijuana, like a half a gram, you can't get a job. So these expungement programs are just as important because this is affecting people's livelihood.
Okay, let's go into Amber's wheelhouse. And we got callers as well, 866-801-8255. Amber Littlejohn is here. Dr. Chanda Macias is here. Both are cannabis experts. If there are people listening right now that have marijuana, what do you call them? Marijuana records? Is that what they call records? What's the easiest way, and can they only expunge them in the states where it's now fully legal, or if they're in Georgia and Florida, can they apply for expungement?
It really depends. It's very specific to the state. Sometimes it is an amount of time that passes. Sometimes it's contingent on whether or not violence is involved. And I have to speak to that because you can have a violence enhancement attached to a cannabis conviction simply by having a license to possess a firearm, or by having a licensed firearm that you lawfully own in your glove compartment. So it just because there is a violence charge on there doesn't mean that there is necessarily violence involved in the cannabis conviction. So it really depends. If your state has legalized cannabis, especially if they've legalized adult use cannabis, absolutely find out, because most states do have a process. But the first step for anybody with a cannabis conviction, actually get a copy of that conviction and to find out what's there, because sometimes people will plead and they'll plead to something else. And this happens quite frequently, where even when there's automatic expungement, they're only expunging cannabis convictions. And sometimes people pled to something like disorderly conduct in lieu of the cannabis conviction. So getting a copy of your convictions, going to a legal aid organization, or going to your public and county legal aid, because there are sometimes mechanisms, even outside of the cannabis laws, that can be used to expunge your record, especially if that is a standalone offense.
And folks, you should do it, to Dr. Chanda's point. Having to check that box. And I think when this is federally legal, and I think it will happen, and I'll get both of yours opinion on when you think that might be, that should be written into the law. Everybody who has a record gets cleared. They no longer have to check a box. I don't even know why you have to check a box if you paid your debt to society, no matter what you did. If you did the time, you shouldn't have to check a box. You're now free. You're clear. This country's so effed up. Okay. Before we go to the phones, Dr. Chanda, do you believe it's going to be federally legal? And if so, when?
I do. So I think it's going to be federally legal, but it's going to be some time, Karen. It's not going to be during this administration. If we're lucky, we might get it at the tail end of the next administration, but Biden has no objective in legalizing cannabis in any way.
That's so it's so easy to do. Amber Littlejohn, why wouldn't he do this?
Biden, I absolutely agree with Dr. Chanda. Biden is not going to legalize cannabis. I think we alluded to this last time I was on. Biden, like so many people of his generation, has a lot of trauma that exists around substances. And so he equates this to that. And so he will never legalize cannabis. He thinks it's bad.
That's personal. You're the president, and you have to. I'm sorry about your son getting caught out there with some drugs and some prostitutes and all the videos that are out there, which I don't talk about in these airways because it doesn't help us move to freedom. But that's your person. That's personal. You're the president of the United States, and there are people languishing right now in this country, and also there's economic empowerment that you could, with the stroke of a pen, put money into Black communities, into Black pockets, and, save a whole lot of neighborhoods just with a stroke of a pen, I think.
Yeah. And on top of Biden, we have Congress, and we don't even have 50 Democratic votes to legalize cannabis right now. let alone the 10 Republicans that we'd need to in a filibuster Congress. So I agree, it's not during the Biden administration. I believe realistically, we've got about 5 to 8 years maybe until we
Wow.
legalize cannabis. One of the biggest things that I don't think we talk about in the legalization struggle is that pharmaceuticals will need to find a lane, and we will have to have a lane in which pharmaceuticals can exist. Democrats, bless their hearts, they love pharma money. And so we're never going to have cannabis legalization unless there is a protected lane for pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs through cannabis. And the hard side of that is we can't have medical cannabis is not compatible with the drug approval process, millions of dollars and years to test a plant that really isn't really even amenable to that process. So we still have a journey and a lot of work to do, but I am heartened by the fact that on the federal side, I see people having a lot deeper conversations about policy and starting to actually have meaningful conversations about what we want the framework to look like, because that in itself was a bit of a struggle.
Wow. Oh, I got questions, but let's go to the phones. 866-801-8255. Dr. Chanda Macias is here, and Amber Littlejohn, who is an attorney in the cannabis space. Both of them are cannabis activists and powerhouses. Tamika in DC, she has a question. Welcome to the Karen Hunter Show.
Hi, everyone. Good evening or good afternoon.
Yes.
I absolutely love your show, Karen. Always listen to this station, every single show. Dr. Chanda, my question is it lucrative to have businesses that do, I guess, the analytics and testing for the different strains? Because that's kind of what I do with DNA for different drugs and different things. But I was just wondering if that's a needed area for this business.
It definitely is. That's a great question. And a lot of people don't look at the labor that goes into the labor of love that goes into research and development. And that's where I come from. I'm a scientist by trade and have studied natural medicines for years. So even now, when you think about opening a testing facility, they're making good money. And when I say that, it's that typically one test that I have to pay for range between $50 and $100. But I'm running through thousands of tests for our products, microbial tests, potency tests, heavy metal tests, stability tests, and all of those have a very big ticket number on there. So if that is an industry you have access to, or you can pull a team for that, then I would definitely apply for it. The one thing that, Tamika, you have to know though, is that the RFA or the approval process for you to apply is a window. Most states don't have rolling application processes like New Jersey and Mississippi. So if you're in a specific area, you have to watch when you'll have that window to apply and be prepared to apply at that time. So I say good luck and go for it, because we need more people like you in the industry.
Amen. Amen. Now, the application costs, because I know to apply for a dispensary, there's all of these costs. Would there be a high cost for it, Tamika, to apply?
It varies from a few $100s to millions of dollars depending on where you are. There are states like Connecticut where if you had $2 million to throw around, you could circumvent the lottery process. And then there are states where, a micro license application may cost you a few $100s. I would say that testing labs tend to be maybe a few $1,000s, single digit few $1,000s. But also keep an eye out for the like DC. There are areas that don't have testing labs, where testing is not a part of their framework. And so if you are in an environment like that, I would encourage you to reach out and meet with the lawmakers, because testing should be a part of any framework. And so reach out and meet with the lawmakers, say, hey, I'm a woman of color. Want to see a testing lab. This is why you want to have a testing lab. I can make it affordable. So there may not be the opportunity existing, but folks like Dr. Chanda here are going into spaces and actually creating the opportunity to be able to operate even when it doesn't necessarily exist at the time that you're interested initially.
That is great advice. And Tamika, I love that and she's in DC. So go ahead and do that. I think we don't utilize the levers of power enough. These people work for us, these elected officials. We got to put them to work. We got to put them
That's
to work.
right.
Amber Littlejohn is here. Dr. Chanda's here.